are far away.
Hello lovelies, welcome back to another episode of Some Thoughts. In this series we discuss and meditate on different leftist topics pertaining to anarchism, communism, black feminism, and the black radical tradition. And it's chill vibes all around. My name is Xenia if it's your first time here, and without further ado, let's get into it. So what got me thinking about this topic is my own relationship. I find myself in times of financial stress imposing capitalist values of work ethic and success upon my partner. And I have to constantly keep reminding myself that there's no clock ticking, there's no rush, and the amount of money that he makes doesn't make him any less legitimate or any less valued as my partner. And it just made me think about how much American and capitalist values can infiltrate even the most intimate spaces of our lives. But it also got me thinking about love, because whenever I think about him, that's what I think about. I know that I love my partner, despite him not being a capitalist success story, because the perfect partner is always portrayed as having some financial value or is used as a status symbol, so think like trophy wives or like rappers having exotic black fishing girlfriends. So just having to acknowledge that fact, it tells me that the way that we think about love under capitalism is severely distorted. Our ability for love and care is so myopic and so hindered, so trapped within this box in which our only purpose is to make money and die, that we forget that it's what comes natural to us. The first things we really experience, the first emotions and feelings we really experience are love from the people who gave birth to us or took care of us or raised us. And the absence of that can really take a toll on our mental and physical health. So is a society set up on love really that far-fetched? Is it so opposite human nature like capitalist realists are always telling us? Well, that's what I think is so special about Anarchy. It gives us glimpses of what a society, a community set up on love can really materially look like. But Anarchy has this big, bad reputation problem. From my short time studying Anarchy, I'm very new, very much an anarcho baby. But just from my short time studying Anarchy, I know that Anarchy is love, and it doesn't take like super big brain power to come to that conclusion. But in the public mind, Anarchy is inherently violent. And anarchist violence is always bad, and capitalist violence is always justified. People are willing to admit that capitalism, has some violent side effects, like it can reward greed and cause people to do wild, dangerous, harmful things in the pursuit of money. And that's sort of just like a side effect of capitalism. But in the public mind, Anarchy produces nothing but violence. They really believe that laws and rulers are the boundary between us and chaos. And maybe even more than violence, Anarchy is equated with chaos. More specifically, lawlessness. Like, without laws, without rulers, we have no order. And the absence of those laws and rulers lets the inherent violence that comes along with Anarchy run amok. So what we as a culture, as a people, are taught about Anarchy is that it is the ultimate state of human decay. It's kind of hard to detach yourself from that way of thinking. In Pëtr Kropotkin's On Order, he writes, "We are often reproached for accepting as a label this word, anarchy, which frightens many people so much. Your ideas are excellent, we are told, but you must admit that the name of your party is an unfortunate choice." Anarchy in common language is synonymous with disorder and chaos. The word brings to mind the idea of interests clashing, of individuals struggling, which cannot lead to the establishment of harmony. And honestly, a few months ago, I used to think this too. Maybe Anarchy wasn't associated so closely with violence in my head, but it was definitely associated very heavily with chaos. But I feel like a way of countering this way of thinking is thinking about all the chaos that we already live in. raging fires in Australia, the Amazon, the West Coast. Hungry people are all over the world, but simultaneously, there is enough food to feed everyone a few times over. Fascism is rising. The ice is melting. Is this not chaos? The state might appear to be an institution invested in order, but in these great United States, the state is doing exactly what it's designed for, defending capital at all costs. And that's where all this chaos we see stems from. So we talked a bit about the association of anarchy with violence, but what is violence? Not to be cliche, but the Google legal definition of violence is the unlawful exercise of physical force or intimidation by the exhibition of such force. So with the word unlawful, this definition automatically leaves out the ways that we can harm each other that aren't against the law, or that the law just doesn't care to prosecute. Things like sexual violence and violence against trans and queer people. These are crimes that go unrecognized and, more importantly, harm that goes unrepaired. And this definition of violence also leaves out the state. The state can't do violence. The state is defined by the legitimate use of violence. The state doesn't prosecute itself for violence done against its people. It never has in any meaningful way, and it never will. These are things like police brutality, poisoning the water supply, allowing homeless people to remain homeless, letting Black and Indigenous kids go undereducated, and generally having the ability to lift people out of material suffering and choosing not to. Another definition of violence revolves around killing, property damage, and physically and directly harming the body. But if that were the case, building a pipeline through Indigenous land wouldn't be considered violence. Gaslighting wouldn't be considered violence. Causing a global economic crisis wouldn't be considered violence. When, girl, it clearly is. So how can we reorient the definition of violence to make clear all the ways the state abuses us and simultaneously detach, violence from the definition of anarchy? So what I came up with, and I would love if you guys would comment some additions or subtractions from this definition, but what I came up with is that violence causes real material damage, be that to your body, your health, your loved ones, the land you live on, the food you eat, the water you drink. If it's hindering your ability to obtain your basic needs that you need to live and survive, and even the higher needs that you need to find joy and fulfillment. This has a lot to do with mental health and psychological manipulation. Violence is non-consensual, and it's something that's imposed on you by the threat of force. And to be clear, to be crystal clear, hierarchy keeps itself intact through violence. There's no other way to do it. And anarchy, at its core, being opposed to hierarchy, is inherently anti-violence. Errico Malatesta writes in his essay, Anarchy and Violence, "In my opinion, there can be no doubt that the anarchist idea, denying government, is by its very nature opposed to violence, which is the essence of every authoritarian system, the mode of action of every government. Anarchy is freedom and solidarity. It is only through the harmonizing of interests, through voluntary cooperation, through love, respect, and reciprocal tolerance, by persuasion, by example, and by the contagion of benevolence, that it can and ought to triumph." The natural enemy of such a violent system is a philosophy of love and care. So, what is love? And I couldn't say it more perfectly than Ronan says in her article, Love and Anarchism, and why they're inseparable. To keep things simple, love is to see someone fully as an agent unto themselves and to take their needs as part of your needs. This is not to bulldoze your own needs in service of another's or to treat another as an extension of yourself. Love has a wholly different quality. It is understanding the full totality and distinctness of another, whole unto themselves, and viewing yourself as not separate from that other. The happiness of another is part of your happiness. The needs of another are a part of your needs. your happiness and theirs simply becomes happiness that is experienced, and your needs and theirs simply become needs that are needed. Love is given freely and can only be given from a place of having freedom. If you've ever loved anyone or anything, you already know how this feels. I love this quote because it's none of that two halves of the same whole BS. It's about harmony of autonomous people coming together, people who see the value in their personhood, the value in their happiness. It's completely mutual, completely consensual. But even something as liberating as love can be constrained, misconstrued, misrepresented, and crushed under this beast that is capitalism. In my opinion, capitalism really leaves no room for love and care. And this might seem like anecdotal evidence, but remember, part of this series is recognizing that the concepts that we read about are present, very much present in our realities. So let's just start with literal romantic love and start with marriage. So first of all, in our country, non-marrying people are punished financially. There's all these legal and financial incentives, as well as a shame incentive for getting married, when the natural incentive for people to be in relationships is the relationship itself. The incentive is that I get to hug them, kiss them, spend time with them, know them, care for them, and be cared for. With artificial incentives, like everything else in capitalism, your love is now entangled with financial interest, with profit motives, with money. Couples who want to be recognized and legitimate and seen as a family get married, of course. But then when you're ready to move into a different stage of your life and you no longer want to be with that person, which is completely natural, that means divorce, which is another expensive process. In certain communities, divorce is also framed as a failure, even though it's perfectly natural to not be with one person for eternity. And the high cost that comes with divorce excludes poor people who need to terminate their marriages because of abuse or just general unhappiness, and they just don't have access to that. And that puts a lot of people in a lot of danger. So is that a society that values love and care? There are also huge stigmas against men who experience sexual violence. There's often attempts to reframe what they experienced as them getting lucky or something that they should be thankful to have went through. Conversely, men who abuse boys are painted as homosexual menaces, rather than men atop a hierarchy who abuse their power, which is what it's actually about. And trans women are viewed by TERFs and all of their allies as men who just want to abuse women and girls. See in both of these examples punishment for the perpetrator and justifying the abuse against LGBTQ people through the equation of them and pedophiles is valued so much more than repairing the harm done to survivors. Is this a society that values love and care? In religious households, babies being born out of wedlock is punishable by being kicked out, being disowned, ostracized. Babies are also very expensive, both in the medical bills for the mother or the birthing parent and the baby. Just having a baby in a hospital, just getting an ambulance ride to a hospital is outrageously expensive. The expenses of childcare and supplies needed for raising it are also wildly expensive and have the power to put a person in debt for a very, very long time. On top of all that, the raising is always expected to be done by just the parents who have brought the child into the world or adopted the child, which is exhausting work for two people, let alone a single parent. Is that a society that values love and care? Money itself and the wage labor we do to receive it is so tightly tied to our humanity and our ability to survive that the system incentivizes hoarding it. But we feel as though if we give our money to homeless people or anybody who needs it, that we'll lose some ability to take care of ourselves. If we see needy people, we're trained to say they should get up and do it for themselves. Why do they need my money? Like they don't deserve to eat or be housed if they don't work for it. Also, money is fake. We made it up. Is this a society that values love and care? The answer is no. So like, what would that look like? What would a society based on love and care look like? Anarchy teaches us to seek out mutually beneficial paths for meeting community needs. It teaches us to know ourselves and recognize what our wants, needs, and desires are. It teaches us that there's power in community, and the only exercise of power that is truly liberating is collective power and the power over the self. It teaches us that we ought to have control over what we all need, so there is no bottom. Some ways for me that can manifest is the community raising of children. Listen, it's beneficial for the parents to get the rest that they need, plus it gives the child access to all these different perspectives and ways of looking at the world. It also avoids teaching the child the value of the singular authority that must be obeyed and helps them see the value of the collective. Another way that this can manifest is democratizing education. We already do this with things like free libraries, and anything that you wish to be educated on, whether that be plumbing, medicine, cosmetology, agriculture, mathematics, whatever you want to know about, we should all have access to that information, and all ways of learning should be considered valid, and we should learn to utilize our skills in fulfilling and beneficial ways for our communities. Another thing, there would be no artificial incentive for marriage or coupling, and no punishments for uncoupling, period. Community gardens would be so useful to get a real personal relationship with the earth, to love it and care for it, to know what's good for it, to help us relate the earth's health directly to our own. I'd like to know what kind of institutions or practices you guys see being replaced with anarchist alternatives, and how can we reorient the way that we think about, a world post-capitalism, assuming we survive capitalism. Like, how can we reorient ourselves to think about that world in terms of love and care? Leave some comments below. Let's get a little conversation started. Thank y'all so much for watching. I hope that we learned. I hope we relaxed. I hope we picked up a makeup tip or two, if you're into that robot clown aesthetic. If you like what I'm doing here, I have a few ways that you can support me. The first one is free. You can like this video, leave a comment to sacrifice to the algorithm, and you can subscribe. It helps me a lot. If you're looking for more makeup content, you can follow me at @glassstick on Instagram. And if you want to support me with your coins, you can head over to patreon.com/zmatthews to check out the tiers. I posted the first leftist meditation reading there a few days ago. We're going to be reading the first chapter of As Black as Resistance by Zoe Samudzi and William C. Anderson this week. I also posted the audio there for people who prefer to listen, as well as the full text in a PDF. Just a $2 pledge as part of the Anarcho Love tier will get you access to all of that. Thank you guys so much for every comment you leave. It really enriches my life, and I hope that in some small way I'm enriching yours. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.